Hello, everyone. In a scene that has captured the hearts and emotions of millions around the world, Wendy Watson Nelson, the beloved wife of President Russell M. Nelson, the late leader of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, was recently seen weeping quietly at her husband's gravesite, a moment so tender and raw that it left onlookers and church members speechless. For decades, President Nelson stood as a towering spiritual leader, guiding millions through faith, compassion, and divine wisdom. His passing marked the end of an era, but it was his wife's heartbreaking visit to his final resting place and what reportedly happened next that turned a moment of mourning into one of the most spiritually profound experiences in recent memory. To truly understand the gravity of that day and why it resonated with so many, we have to go back to the beginning, to the love story, the faith journey, and the divine partnership that defined Russell and Wendy Nelson's lives together, and how their bond continues to transcend even the boundaries of life and death. Russell M. Nelson wasn't just a spiritual leader. He was a man of brilliance, humility, and unshakable devotion. Born in 1924 in Salt Lake City, Utah, he lived nearly a century dedicated to serving God, medicine, and humanity. Before becoming the 17th president of the LDS Church, he was a pioneering heart surgeon who performed Utah's first open-heart surgery, saving countless lives through both skill and faith. But behind the doctor's precision and the prophet's authority was always the heart of a husband and father who valued family above all. His first marriage to Dancel White produced 10 children and spanned nearly 60 years before her passing in 2005. It was a loss that deeply wounded him, yet, as fate and faith would have it, that pain would soon lead him to Wendy Watson, a woman whose intellect, compassion, and spiritual strength would become his second great love and eternal companion. Wendy Watson, a distinguished professor and therapist, met President Nelson when both were deeply committed to serving God and guiding others through faith. Their courtship was quiet, grounded in mutual respect and shared devotion, and in 2006, they were sealed for time and all eternity in the Salt Lake Temple. From that day forward, they became inseparable, partners in every sense of the word. Sister Nelson often stood beside her husband as he traveled the world, preaching the gospel, comforting the brokenhearted, and reminding people that God's love was eternal. Those who witnessed them together often remarked that they radiated peace, the kind of harmony that can only come when two souls are perfectly aligned in purpose. She once described their marriage as a union built not just on love, but on revelation. And that bond endured right up until his final breath. When President Nelson passed away, it sent a wave of grief through the entire Latter-day Saint community. Members wept, temples lowered their flags, and tributes poured in from across the globe. But amid the public mourning, Sister Wendy Nelson withdrew quietly, processing the loss of not only a prophet, but the man who had been her constant companion, confidant, and spiritual partner. For months, she stayed out of the public eye, and many wondered how she was coping. Then, weeks later, photos and eyewitness accounts emerged of Wendy visiting her husband's grave, a visit that became one of the most deeply emotional and unforgettable moments in the church's recent history. According to those present, Sister Nelson arrived alone at the serene Salt Lake City Cemetery, dressed modestly and carrying a bouquet of white lilies, her husband's favorite flower. She knelt at the gravestone, her hand trembling as she traced his name etched in marble, Russell Marion Nelson, prophet, seer, and revelator. For several moments, she remained silent, her lips moving in what appeared to be a private prayer. Then, witnesses say, tears began streaming down her face as she whispered words that only heaven could hear. "I miss you, my dear. she reportedly said softly, "But I know you're not far." The scene was deeply moving, but what followed next left everyone nearby
Sister
utterly
Nelson
stunned.
continued
Praying. A sudden breeze swept through the cemetery, carrying with it a faint scent of lilies, even though there were none blooming nearby. Some who were there described feeling an overwhelming warmth, a peace that seemed to surround her, almost like an unseen embrace. One witness said, "It felt like the Spirit of the Lord was there." You could feel something sacred, something beyond this world. Sister Nelson later told close friends that in that moment she felt her husband's presence, not as a ghostly figure, but as a calm, reassuring impression in her heart. "He was there," she reportedly said. "I could feel his love, as real as the day we were sealed." What moved so many people wasn't just that she felt his presence, but what she chose to do afterward. After her tears had dried, Sister Nelson stood up, looked toward the sky, and said, "I will finish what we started." She then placed her wedding ring on the headstone for a brief moment, a symbolic act of eternal devotion, before slipping it back on her finger. That gesture, so simple yet profound, encapsulated the entire doctrine they had lived and taught, that love and family are eternal, and that death is but a temporary separation. In the days following that emotional visit, Sister Nelson released a quiet statement through the church's media department, expressing gratitude for the outpouring of love and emphasizing her continued faith in God's eternal plan. "Russell taught me that death is not the end," she wrote. "He often said that when our mortal journey concludes, it is merely a return home, to peace, to joy, and to reunion. I find strength in knowing he is continuing his work on the other side, and I will continue mine here." Her words brought comfort to millions of Latter-day Saints who were still mourning the loss of their prophet, reminding them that faith endures even when the heart breaks. Since then, Sister Nelson has continued to honor her husband's legacy through service, speaking engagements, and quiet acts of kindness. She has visited members of the church who are struggling with grief, sharing her story and encouraging them to trust in the eternal nature of love. Those who have met her describe her as radiantly peaceful, saying that she often refers to her late husband as "my eternal companion who is just beyond the veil." Her strength has inspired thousands who have faced loss, showing that faith does not erase pain, but it transforms it into purpose. In many ways, President Nelson's passing has taken on a new spiritual dimension within the church. Members have shared stories of feeling his influence in their lives, of hearing his words echo in their prayers, of remembering his counsel to let God prevail. For Wendy Nelson, those teachings are not just words, they are lived reality. She often quotes her husband's favorite scripture from the Book of Mormon: "Men are that they might have joy." And even amid her grief, she has found that joy, not in what was lost, but in what still remains. What happened at the gravesite that day may never be fully understood by those who weren't there, but its impact has been undeniable. For those who witnessed it, it was a moment of divine tenderness, a reminder that love does not die, that faith bridges worlds, and that even in the quiet stillness of a graveyard, heaven can speak. As one church member beautifully said afterward, "Sister Nelson showed us what true discipleship looks like, trusting that God's promises are real, even when your heart is breaking today." As Sister Wendy Nelson continues to live with grace and purpose, she stands as a living testament to everything she and her husband taught, that the covenants we make, the families we build, and the love we give are eternal. And though her tears at his grave were real, so too was her smile as she walked away that day, a quiet, knowing smile that seemed to say, "This is not goodbye. It's just until we meet again." For millions who loved and followed President Russell M. Nelson, That moment became a symbol of enduring hope, a sacred reminder that death cannot silence love, and that faith, when lived deeply, always writes the final word. Thanks for watching.